I watched, like in the last couple of weeks, I think I watched There Will Be Blood, which I think is an amazing film. I mean, you know, the character arc is very interesting. It's a bastard who becomes more of a bastard. You know? It's like, but the soundtrack for that was just remarkable.
When you see something like that, does it inspire you to draw?
Be a bastard?
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the things that I watch when I'm painting or listen to while I'm painting, that kind of it infuses what I'm doing, or sometimes it'll echo it, or sometimes it'll be the opposite. When I worked on the Hendrix bio, I listened to Hendrix for a long time, and then at a certain point, I literally reached like a saturation point, and I couldn't. It started to get very ebullient and as amazing as his music is. I mean, I started to get really bummed out, so that he wasn't around. So I just I started switching. I just like I went to like classical or like Wendy Carlos from really more abstract kind of music and stuff like that. It's really sort of ambient. And then I went to a real Celtic phase. Listening to a lot of bagpipes and flutes and stuff. So, but I was a leadhead as well. So I'm like, total Robert Plant. One of my biggest thrills ever was actually getting to meet him backstage at the Hollywood Bowl. Because I was actually Ian Astbury from a group called the Cult. Ian Astbury from the Cult. She sells Sanctuary by the seashore. But he actually contacted me to work on an album, and went to see the show. So actually, meeting him, it was like, there are some people who give off that energy, that you probably heard that kind of thing about. Well, he was one of those kind of people. It's just amazing. But so it's really kind of an interesting, thing with what we work to. I know a lot of professionals who have the TV on just as a background, because if you're not working with somebody else, it can be very isolating. So one of the things about social media is so great is you can kind of keep in touch with everybody and not necessarily feel that cut off.
Without ever interacting with them.
Yeah, you can just sort of post things, whatever. But any of those things can also take away from being in the moment, in the groove. So I tend to be kind of like a groundhog. I'll be really totally focused on what I'm doing, and then won't be going out at all. And then when I'm done, it's like, it's the sun, the air. It's like refilling the lungs.
Cool. Tony, do you have anything on in the background when you're working?
Yeah, I listen to. I've got a satellite radio, so I keep a pretty constant stream of everything. Plus, I've got like a crazy person's music catalog. So
Captain Random.
Yeah, I mean, like from one end to the other.
Yeah.
Because I've listened to so many things for so much that I get tired of it, so I have to dig a little further back in the crate.
You ever? I do the same thing. If you ever? I guess eclectic is probably about maybe too soft a word for some of it.
Schizophrenic.
Yeah, exactly. But do you ever listen to stuff all the way through? I mean, like until you get completely sick of it, or do you like parse it out, like sort of?
I'll hit a hot streak on something where I'll loop it over and over and over, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to step away.
Yeah, exactly.
Bill's gonna have a lovely pencil sketch by the end of this. Yes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I listened to. He mentioned There Will Be Blood. Like Coen Brothers are some of my hugest influences of storytelling and subject matter. They haven't put out anything that I haven't loved. I listen to a lot of country music though. For some reason, it's all storytelling. So in my head, like it kind of activates a little part of my brain where I'm seeing the stories in my head as it plays. And, the tempo's up enough that it's not. It doesn't lull me to sleep, but it's not like. Driving like, death metal or something.
Right.
Which sometimes I need that to wake me up, but, I might have that, Lefty Frizzell stacked next to Emperor, with Del the Funky Homo Sapien behind that. God knows what, like all in a slew, That's
Glenn Gould.
Yeah, actually, and I actually got really into Bruce Coburn when working with him. It's like, so I love his politics as well. You know, his, you know, and I always felt he was sort of the, you know, Canadian version of Springsteen in some respects.
Yeah, definitely. No, he's great. Yes, you with the hat.
What are your favorite things or figures or people or whatever to draw?
That's a really open question. What do you like to draw, Tony?
I like to draw monsters and psychopaths and sociopaths and cowboys.
No relation.
Yeah, it's not a reflection of myself at all.
Bill?
I love drawing and painting women. I mean, I like doing psychopaths and sociopaths. Sometimes they happen to be women. But I think the idea is that I mean, there have been days I've been totally into just drawing trees because they have character. I mean, the idea of playing with shape, it's really, after a certain point, it's not so much the thing, it's the shapes and things like that. So, and how it hits you. So it really depends on the day. I mean, I've gone through days where I just draw cars, you know, or things, or I have a lot of drawings. When I used to take my sketchbook everywhere, because I've got about 40 or 50 of them, and I used to fill them up. And I used to take the train into Manhattan. I have so many drawings of people asleep, and it's you know, it's kind of frightening. I remember one time I did a drawing of a woman. She must have been in her 60s, and she had a fur coat on and a fur hat, and I did a kind of a very caricaturist drawing of her. She had very pronounced cheekbones. She was very, I presume, very wealthy, and I did it, and I sort of really abstracted her. I made her like a caricature, you know, and it was not a kind image. And she was sitting opposite me on the other side, and she said, "Oh, you're an artist. Can I see what you're doing?" I was, and I showed it to her, and she went from having this smile on her face to like she just immediately handed it back to me like I was this beast, you know? And so there are other times you have the complete opposite response, but when they happen like that, it's, you know, people say that art doesn't affect people. No, it does. It does. So
Yeah.
Young lady, you have a question? Or are you just stretching? Oh, were you stretching? Oh, you have a question? Yep, go ahead.
Tony Moore.
Yes.
What is the comic book you like to draw?
What is the comic book you like to
What's your
draw?
favorite comic book?
What's your favorite comic book?
Oh,
That you like to do.
well, my favorite book to draw. I had a lot of fun. Rick Remender and I did a series that we worked on for about 7 years called Fear Agent.
Whoa! Yeah!
Thank you. You were the sole audience. But yeah, it was basically, I mean, we loved it so much because it was our baby and we could put anything we wanted into it. So, you know, it started as kind of a big space fantasy, Bollywood style action thing, and you know, whatever genre we felt like bending it into, you know. So at one point it became a war book, at one point it became a western. You know, whatever itch we had, we could scratch it in that book, and that kind of creative freedom is something that doesn't come incredibly often. And so I'd say that's probably, and knowing that it's something that we built from the ground up together, ultimately made it more creatively satisfying than just about anything else I've ever done.
Personal satisfaction. Yes, the back.
What influenced you to draw zombies?
What's that now?
What influenced you to draw zombies?
What influences you to draw zombies?
Pretty much a lifelong horror fan. You know, I've always loved horror movies and stuff like that, and but I grew up on a farm, so I was kind of yeah. So I was pretty familiar with like all the horrors of things, you know, like when you have a cow go missing and you can't find it for 5 or 6 days. Sometimes you happen across it in the woods and it's all bloated and whatever. And when you're a 10-year-old kid, you just stick right there. check it out. You learn all kinds of interesting things about